Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Bonus Points podcast. I am your host Joe Garrett, as always being joined by Ollie Guy.
Hello.
For those of you watching the video version, you can see that Ollie is completely moved in to his new flat with soundproofing sponge stuck on every surface available.
You might be able to see the soundproofing sponge. I don't know how much where the crop is. You might be able to. There's definitely some here with my recording light that I had to make sure was in the background once again.
We've got, and then your microphone has got a little hat as well. Looks like a little Queen's Guard.
I thought if I'm going to wear a hat myself, I need to get my microphone.
I did
You've
just
got a pair of
realise
glasses as well, but they're off the bottom of the frame.
You really like your microphone. I might in editing just switch you round so it's your little face down there, but then the microphone above you.
I think that's a good idea. Why not?
Yeah, just your eyes and mouth on the microphone, just talking away about Rogue.
Or you could do the upside down chin thing. You could put me upside down.
Right, apologies to audio listeners, but I would have done something in editing there, so maybe it's worth just clicking on the video to watch the first minute to see whatever extra work I ended up putting myself through to do that little bit. Anyway,
seeing my new house as well. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you're going to do a little house tour.
Very little. Recording light, shelf, picture, window. There you go.
Beautiful. Right then, should we talk about what game we're doing this week?
Yes, I have the little Wikipedia thing, but it's very short. Very, very short. So I think most people kind of know what a roguelike is, and we're going to get into that. But anyway, it goes as follows. Rogue, also known as Rogue Exploring the Dungeons of Doom, is a dungeon crawling video game by Michael Toy and Glenn Wichman, with later contributions by Ken Arnold. Rogue was originally developed around 1980 for Unix-based mini-computer systems as a freely distributed executable, which is a lot of jargon in there. But basically, it's, like a roguelike. This is the one. This is the one
this
it's
is
like.
What they're like, yeah. So we're getting a bit more in terms of the history and the development and the weird way it's been released and stuff. But I think first it's good to just kind of explain just kind of what this game looks like and what the process of interfacing with this game is like. Do you kind of want to explain? Well, firstly, what version of the game did you end up playing?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask, because the one that I played, the only way I can tell the difference is my character was like a little smiling face.
Yeah. And
the other one is he's an @ sign, isn't he?
Yeah, so the original version, the 1981, it's just all using characters, basically text stuff, @ signs, as you said, hashtags and stuff, because there wasn't graphical, just graphics, computer graphics didn't exist properly when it was released. The version on Steam, which it sounds like is the version you played, that same version as well, is the EPYX version. Epics, is that the way you pronounce it?
Okay. Yeah.
Oh God, I'd have probably said E-Pikes, which would have sounded even worse. So that version was released in 1985 and was one of the first commercial release, of which there were many, because it was ported to all, it wasn't unified. There wasn't Windows and Mac, like there is now. There was all different operating systems and different types of devices and stuff. So it was kind of by different companies released on different versions, but it seems like the Epix one was kind of the one that most people played. So that's the version that me and Ollie played, and that's the version there's footage of on screen for the video podcast.
Yeah, so should we just first of all, let's talk about the game itself first, I guess.
Yeah.
Should probably be quite short. I think. I didn't get that far in it. I think I got down to maybe 16 or 17 levels.
Okay.
So in the game, if you're listening to the audio-only version, you basically are a little smiling face, and you kind of move around a grid, and the level kind of builds itself in front of you as you go. And there's enemies that you have to battle. You're meant to be a dungeon crawling guy who's a rogue, and you basically battle by just banging into them until one of you dies. And all of the commands and stuff in the game are done via like actually typing them in on your keyboard, or pressing very weird combinations of buttons because I guess maybe mouse interface wasn't that good then, or they didn't have them.
No, they wouldn't. This would be before kind of Mac popularized the use of a mouse. So it would have been all keyboard.
It's so far back, right? Just picture this in your mind, everyone, that the up, down, left, right keys by default were in a straight line on the keyboard. So it was like HJKL was up, down, left, right. Like they didn't even think to put them in a cross. That's how far back we're talking. But yeah, the version we played used the arrow keys, so that was all right. But it was like you have to play it with a guide open with all the commands on it, because otherwise you cannot remember.
Well,
I thought I remembered them.
You can bring them up in game just to.
Oh yeah, but you still have to look at them.
Yeah,
you can't remember them. Yeah,
no. I mean, you get to a point where you remember like some of the things you do regularly. So it's like So basically, it's almost like every key on the keyboard is used essentially, and then a lot of them double because it'll be like capital W to do one thing and lowercase w to do something else. So you're using caps as well. But the game, in terms of what you're actually doing, isn't actually that complicated. So it's like very simple things with extremely complicated ways of doing it. And I think a good example is, say, if you want to shoot like your bow, is so you're going around, say you're holding your mace, which is like the weapon you start with, and there's an enemy you want to like shoot with your bow. You have to press W to change what weapon you're wielding. So then you're wielding like, then you'd have to press another like letter for what is your bow. So it'll come up with a list of say press like G, and it seems like a random selection of letters to get your bow out. And then you want to like to shoot your arrow, it counts as throwing it. So you then press T to say you want to throw it. And then you say which direction, you point in the direction you want to throw it in. It will then say, well, what do you want to throw? And then you have to say arrow. And then it will shoot out a little arrow, which normally misses. And then you have to kind of do the whole thing again to shoot again or to switch back. So like any very simple action, it normally requires multiple like unclear, confusing button presses.
Yeah. And I guess even another thing of that would be to go through a door, you have to use the greater than symbol or the less than symbol. I can't remember which one it is. One of the arrows. So it's just like shift and a thing just to go through a door.
Can I blow your mind?
Enter doesn't work.
That's a staircase that you're going down. It's not a door.
Oh, I guess you're going. So basically, the story is you're going down, aren't you? And you have to find an amulet and then bring it up. That's the amulet of Yendor, which is just one of their mates' names backwards as Rodney.
Is that what it is?
Yeah,
that's so funny. Did you get it? Did you get the amulet?
No, so I think there's 26 or 25 floors, and I got to about, 17, 18.
Do you know how much gold you got? Did you make a note? So I didn't realize you collect gold, but you never find a shop. So I kept thinking, why am I getting all this gold?
Yeah, I thought there might be a shop. No,
so gold's your score. That's your score is your gold.
Right, okay. Well, I basically could tell if I was going to have a good run within the first like level or two.
Yeah.
Basically, if you're finding the good armor, the ring armor, or it's like armor +1/+1. It's like, okay, I'm probably going to be all right for quite a long time. And it also has other things that like you can get hungry. You have to make sure you've got food, but like it's not constantly ticking down. You're either fine or you're like you're starving. So you have to like keep an eye out where it says hungry. And I guess the reason for that is because when you move around, you can regenerate your health. So you can just run in a circle and your health will go up, but then you get hungry, so you have to eat. I don't know, like it was pretty cool. And the pace was pretty good because obviously you set your own pace, but like this is definitely the oldest, most basic thing we've done.
Well, it's so basic in so many ways, but so like confusing in like so many ways it doesn't need to do. Do you want to laugh? So when I loaded up the game and I picked up my controller to start playing, little did I know what I was getting myself into.
So, like, the enemies are just the first letter of their name, aren't they?
Yeah, so like a zombie would just be like a Z coming after you.
Well, you say zombie as like, oh yeah, zombie, but what about a kestrel or an emu? Which are like two of the pretty regular enemies.
Do you have a favourite or least favourite enemy?
My least favourite was the snake, because it bites you and you lose health, or you lose strength.
Yeah.
So
I didn't like the slimes.
I mean, like,
because
slimes.
Yeah, because they can multiply if you attack them.
Oh,
and then
right,
you kind of
yeah,
get
yeah,
like surrounded. Also, I just realized that's why because it's a snake, but if they do R, they make it a rattlesnake because there's two enemies beginning with S.
Well, they also do
one.
the lowercase and uppercase if they can change
Yeah.
to change the enemy as well. But this is like, if you're watching the video version, you can see this is as basic as it comes, really.
Yeah. So like in the original version, it would literally be like you're going down a cave and it'll be just a line of hashtags that an @ symbol is making its way down. That's the level of simplicity. But wait, did you have any like stories that came out? Any cool moments where your back's against the wall and you made it out somehow or anything like that?
I just had one or two really good runs where I beat like a couple of minotaurs or centaurs or something. And I had one where I found loads of scrolls of identify at the beginning, so I could like identify all of them. So that's the other thing, is items that you find, you don't know what they are unless you either just use them, which is like mad because they can like make you sick and make you walk in reverse and stuff.
Yeah.
Or identify them. And then after you've used them, you can name them. But even then, it's not clear what's happening.
I know.
It'll be like, your hand glows red. What would you like to name it? And it's like, power up, I guess.
Yeah, I'd be like, red hand, question mark, or it'd be like, you feel like someone's watching you. And I'm like, I think I called that one like the big brother potion or something.
Yeah, I put revival because I assumed that was like a guardian angel type.
Okay.
But I don't know. I don't think it was that because I don't remember coming back to life, actually, now I think about it.
There was sometimes cool moments where I worked that out myself. Like I realized that so there's some of the areas you go to, it's a room where it's really dark and you kind of have to walk in to kind of fill in the walls and stuff. And then within that room, I had a new wand that I wanted to check out what it did. So I pressed Z to zap and went to zap towards an enemy to see if it would attack it. But it lit up the whole room. And so I was like, it's obviously
nice.
like a brightness one. And so then, that area had loads of dark areas. So I went zapping my way through, lighting my way up, but I'd never identified it to officially know what it was.
Yeah. I mean, the crazy thing is like the fact that the graphics are so simple, but they do manage to denote a room being dark.
Yeah.
Like how, like all it is every room has little green dots in that show where you can move. And then when there's no green dots in it, like, oh yeah, it's a dark room. Like, of course. But like, it's crazy when you look at it.
And then they kind of do almost like the fog of war kind of effect that they do in real-time strategies where, there'd be a room full of enemies and they're in there, but you don't see them until you enter the room. And so you can be surprised, you'd be exploring. Sometimes you enter a room and there'd be like 5 enemies in there, which is like a lot for this game. And then you're like, okay, let's run away. Or there was one time when I was like surrounded like by enemies. I was basically dead. So I did what I always do at the end of a run and just panic drink everything and read every scroll just in case something saves me. And one of the scrolls was a teleportation scroll. And it teleported me somewhere else and survived me. So that's probably my best tale of kind of emergent gameplay, I guess.
Yeah, the first time I found out you could find secret walls was like right at the exact time I needed it because I was struggling in a dead end and I went on the manual to look at something else. And I was like, oh, you can like scan for traps and secret walls. I was just like mashing the S, walking around, and it just opened up another room. That was pretty good, but it's like you really have to use your imagination. Like you really, really have to use your imagination. Like I feel like maybe if someone made a mod that added some little characters, it would probably go quite a long way to make this game pretty cool. But like, it's a fun game. Don't get me wrong, it's a fun game. It's just a bit of a struggle. Also, I don't know if it was just mine, but like, it doesn't have any sound, right?
No, it doesn't have any sound.
It has one sound effect. Did you have that? That was like when you step on a trap or something, it like sounds like electricity crackling. Like I thought there was something wrong with my screen.
Oh, really? I think because I knew it didn't have sound, I didn't even bother turning my speaker on. So
right, okay.
I probably wouldn't have even known like after the first bit. But it actually made it quite nice because it's a great podcast game or Netflix in the background game or something. Like something we haven't mentioned is it's turn-based. So, time doesn't move unless you move. So you can think out your actions, but also it's great if you are doing something else at the same time. You can almost have it not on in the background, but you can kind of just take your time with it and have it not taking all your focus because it generally doesn't need all your focus for most of the stuff you're doing.
No, I was watching Seinfeld while I was playing, so I was like, my rogue's name is Seinfeld. This guy's called, like, George.
It's weird just
like,
naming everything. They're always like, "What you picked a thing? What do you want to call it? You got a new ring. What do you want to call it?" And then like every character you're naming. And it's quite nice at the end as well because it does like kind of like a hall of fame. So when you die, it will list kind of all of your previous runs and their names, and it will show how much gold they managed to get, which is quite nice to kind of look back on, even if it's only your own stats. I mean, in a modern version, it'd be great if that included like your friends lists, their like best ones and stuff, could kind of make it a bit more competitive.
It took me a few sessions to realize how to restart the game, because you have to type rogue back in, and I didn't know that, so I was just refreshing I played it in a web browser, so I was like refreshing the page. But that's actually why they called it rogue, is because they were like, it needs to be short so that when you're typing in commands, it's not like annoying.
Okay.
So that's why they settled, because the other games like it were called like Dungeons and Dragons, and it'd be like Dungeons and Dragons.save. So they called it something really short so that when people typed it in, it'll be really convenient.
Oh, that's interesting.
I've got lots of interesting trivia about this game. Do you know it wasn't the first roguelike?
No, I did pick that. They were saying it's the first dungeon crawler roguelike.
Yeah.
It's so weird that there's like roguelikes before rogue. I guess they're just likes.
Yeah. This is likes. Like what? I don't know. We'll find out together. Also something go on, sorry.
Just in those super weird things. Also, it probably came out in 1980. Then no one's really sure when it was actually made. Well, I mean, according to Wikipedia, they say around 1980 because obviously it was just kind of given out for free and shared with people, and it seems like the creators don't exactly know when they made it. So around 1980.
It's also really hard to find facts and documentation about the game. Like, it just seems to be lost to time. But there is something I did want to point out, because obviously the game, we think 1980-ish, it doesn't really have any like graphics. There's games that came out in 1980 that do actually have graphics and like look pretty good. So it's like quite weird that like this didn't have graphics for so long, because obviously it had multiple re-releases like, up to 1983 or 4, and like Pac-Man came out in 1980, and that has like graphics.
I guess it's the fact that it was made by like basically a group of students, and they'd be making it with the hardware that's available to them. But I guess like as you're saying, the re-releases is where that's surprising. I could imagine it was deep in the time where like arcade games were hugely more powerful than anything you'd have at home. So maybe most of the games with somewhat decent graphics were arcade games.
Yeah, so basically the third guy that I read out the name of, Ken Arnold, he was responsible for this thing called like the Curse graphics software, which he basically figured out how to get a computer to display things other than like @ signs and pound signs. So he was the one that was like, oh yeah, we can add like music notes and stuff like that. But like, just what a crazy time to be making games. Something like that has hung around for so long as such a good idea. And it's literally like 3 guys who are like, we don't even know where we made it.
Yeah. But you can see why it did grow so popular back in the day. Because if you think about the other types of games that were released, like there were games that were like dungeon crawlers, and they said themselves they were inspired by, it was like a Star Trek game, which was an entirely text-based version of this. But like the fact that it's still a little bit compelling, and I still had like a just one more attempt. I think I even named a character One More Attempt once, because that's exactly what I was thinking. And then you think about all of the games that are available like today, like the fact that it still has that, despite like all of the frustration and the awkwardness that goes through to just controlling this game. Just the core idea of, you can, it doesn't matter that you died, you can start fresh. Can you make it further? Like that core mechanic of roguelikes is so compelling and draws you back in. Like you can see why, despite the loose graphics and the way it's kind of not balanced very well, and it, maybe every potion you picked up shouldn't be unknown unless you get this
Unnamed.
rare scroll. Yeah, like there's a lot of... We could nitpick this game until like there's not much left apart from the core idea with those little mechanics, but that core is so strong that it kind of holds everything else up.
So on that, I did some research into the Berlin Roguelike Developers Conference, which they have, I think, every year or every other year. And they come up with the 8 rules of a roguelike called the Berlin Interpretation of Roguelikes. So in order to be a roguelike, you have to have a version of these 8 things, apparently. I mean, who cares? They don't know.
Well, that's my first thought is like, who are these people? Like, from what you want.
Well, these are people that come together because they just develop roguelikes. They don't develop anything else. So the first thing you have to have is randomly generated dungeons or levels, which I think is, that's pretty standard. Then you have to have permadeath, but they called it consequence persistence when permadeath didn't exist. That's what they used to call it. It has to be turn-based, so you need to be able to have time to think about what it is you're doing. You can't just go for it and, lose out. Non-modal gameplay, which apparently, done some research into this as well, means that everything that you can do in the game, you need to be able to do from the start. You cannot gain abilities. You have to be able to do every action.
So not like equipment and stuff, but like you can't unlock a higher jump or something.
Exactly. And emergent gameplay, so systems, which is like your favorite thing.
Yeah.
Everything in the game has to affect every object equally. Is one of their other rules. Limited resources and mystery items that you have to identify. I think like maybe that one not so much. And the final one is hack and slash gameplay. But I feel like modern roguelikes, they usually take one of these things and change it, and then kind of keep the rest of it. So like hack and slash gameplay, enter the gungeon, obviously you have a gun. Everything else is kind of
I bet you couldn't get a roguelike that hits 3 of those. Like
really?
The turn-based gameplay, it's got to be like, was it like a fantasy setting? Like I can't think...
Hack and slash gameplay.
Okay.
But I could think of one that could hit 3 of them.
Okay, go on then. That's your challenge.
Hades?
So it's not turn-based. Like you got the list up.
Randomly generated. Permadeath.
Okay. That's the one they're all going to hit.
Resources.
Is it permadeath? It's not, because it's consistent. You die and then you're back, but then you just carry on. Like, is that?
Yeah. So you have the, I don't know what they call that, but I much prefer that style.
So that they call that a roguelite rather than a roguelike when there's like persistence. So you're kind of all, and that's I think the dominant genre now. There's very few. I think Spelunky maybe is the only one that's like modern one that's kind of a bit stricter to being a roguelike.
Yeah, because that has randomly generated dungeons, permadeath, non-modal gameplay, emergent gameplay, limited resources. I don't know if it has mystery items. Never played it enough to know.
Probably. It feels like it would.
Well, there you go. That's 5 of the 8. But I mean, they said that, and it's like, well, people just make whatever they want.
And I think that's because Spelunky was like an older one, like out of like the modern crop, like the original, Flash version of Spelunky. It was very much like, I'm going to make Rogue, but a 2D platformer. Whereas these modern ones, like things like Returnal, Hades, Dead Cells and stuff, are much more like, the idea of like you're doing a run and it's randomly generated every time. That's a cool mechanic. We're going to take just that and then make a game around it. And anything else actually, that might go and be similar to the original Rogue is kind of a coincidence. I don't think they're really thinking, let's look at this like 1980s game. What are we going to twist? They're thinking of like...
No. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also... I've got a list of games that are roguelikes that I didn't even think about when I was thinking about this genre. So Spelunky was the first one, which I just hadn't really considered. When you're playing Rogue...
Oh, really?
Thinking about games, I just wasn't like Spelunky and Rogue are similar. The other one was Slay the Spire, FTL, and Binding of Isaac.
Yeah,
I didn't think about Binding of Isaac.
That was like the big one, I think, that really blew up and kind of gave a resurgence to the genre. I had another weird one which I thought of by myself. Is
by yourself?
Is Minecraft, especially Minecraft hardcore mode, which means when you die, it deletes your world. Like that fits.
Yeah.
That fits most of the genre, like most of the requirements, the Berlin roguelike requirements.
The Berlin interpretation, yeah. No,
Yeah,
I guess you're right.
Because it's permadeath, randomly generated world, like randomized like enemies, hack and slash gameplay. Like it's ticking quite a few of them.
What about Tetris? It's randomly generated.
Well, it doesn't work. No, it's always a box or a rectangle you're playing in. Like if every time the level you like was a different shape that you're trying to move the tetrinos, whatever they're called, down through.
Oh God, tetraminos. Yeah, that sounds stressful. So what was your? Oh, actually, no. Let's quickly do this first. Do you know the Mystery Dungeon series of games? There's a couple of Pokemon ones.
Oh yeah, well I've heard of them. I never played one.
Well, there's like quite a lot of these Mystery Dungeon games, and they started making, you know, like how Dynasty Warriors made like a Zelda game, and like so they make like themed ones and that. The first one is like a slight change of Rogue, and then they just took it and ran with it. Which like I was also very surprised by that. There's basically a version of Rogue that takes place in Pokemon.
Yeah,
which is like pretty crazy. But yeah, it started as Dragon Quest spin-off, and then they just made the Pokemon one. And there's also the Final Fantasy one, Chocobo Mystery Dungeon or something. I think they do a lot of them in Japan that we don't get over here. So
yeah. Do you have a favorite roguelike?
Yes, Into the Breach. Definitely.
Ah, of course. Yeah. That hits the turn, but that's one of the few ones that's still turn-based.
Yeah, true. That's what I like about it, though. Like, you get time to think about it, you know. That game is spectacular. That game and Slay the Spire, especially on roguelikes, are like probably some of the best design games ever made.
Yeah, no, Slay the Spire would be for sure mine. And then I really love Dead Cells as well. I don't know if you played that, but that's another great one.
I played a bit of it, and then I think after you die for the first time, you go back to like this dungeon, and then you run through a room, and there's like all these jars hanging.
Yeah.
And
so that's the rogueliteness. You're unlocking more as you go.
I saw that room full of jars, and I was like, I can't. I can't. There's too many jars. I didn't play it ever again.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe now they've added Castlevania, maybe I'll play it again.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that there is like an ending that you can complete it as well, because I feel like most roguelikes do have an ending, a final boss, or a final goal. Which I don't know. Did you feel that's kind of against the idea of kind of how it would work, or do you feel like it's good to have that?
I mean, it's good to have it, but I've noticed that a lot of roguelikes now, the ending is like complete the game 3 times.
Yeah.
The first time you complete it, you get part 1 of the thing you need, and then you have to keep completing it over and over.
Yeah.
So that's like maybe not so much anymore. It's quite cool that it ends, but the guy who designed it, he basically wanted, I don't know how much research he did, but he basically wants to make a game that he could play himself and not finish it. Yeah. So the fact that he added an ending, I don't know if that flies in the face of that.
Well, maybe it's like he can keep, he can get to the end, but he can still play it again.
I tell you what, if it was endless, the memory of the old computers would just.
That's true. You'd get to a point where just the screen would go mad and it all.
Yeah.
Would you even notice? You think you found like a secret dungeon or something?
So I didn't even program this in. Wow.
Yeah, that's the way to make it really interesting. Play like the death screens from like when you score too many points and it runs out of memory.
Yeah, so when he made the first version, like a bunch of others, it was like a college thing, or he did it at uni or something, and like another uni made a bot that could complete the game. So then he was like, okay, I'm going to update it in a version that breaks the bot, and then they basically did that back and forth for like a few years, and that's how you ended up with the newest version. Is that he was like, I don't want a bot to be able to complete it. I want a human to have to sit there and think about it.
Yeah.
I don't know if he was successful, but probably not, considering we got tool-assisted speedruns and stuff now.
Yeah.
Back then, it was probably.
So, would you say you're like a fan of the roguelike genre? So, say if I'm listing off stuff about a game and saying like, oh yeah, I don't know, 2D graphics, like this setting, blah blah blah, and then if I say roguelike, does that make you more or less excited, or are you just think, it depends on what the game's actually like.
I reckon probably less, to be honest with you. They're
Yeah.
not short games, are they?
Yeah.
Roguelikes, they tend to be quite long. Because I wrote one down that I was thinking the first roguelike that I played and like actually got it, and it clicked, and I was like, oh, I understand what's happening. There's a game called Going Under that came out in 2020. I don't know if you played it. It's on the Switch.
Is that the one where you're an intern? Is it that one?
Yes. Yeah. So I got really excited by that because it was the first time I'd ever played and understood a roguelike. I think everyone else was like, 50 years ahead of me, 40 years ahead of me. But I thought that was great. But that was another one that like I finished it, and it was like, oh, you've got one of the 3 things you need to get in order to finish it again. But anyone, that hasn't played Going Under, you basically play as an intern at a company, and you're on the top floor of a skyscraper, your office, and you fight your way down. And it turns out that all the other floors are failed companies you have to fight your way through. And it has a pretty cool like corporate art style, which is like my day job. So I like really recognized like all the stuff that they were going through was like really hitting, and like the satire was bang on for like what I was working on at the time. But yeah, that was the first time I really got it. I didn't realize that Hades actually came out before then. Yeah. So I must have played it and then been like, I don't understand what this is.
It's so weird because they're so like all over the place. Like my worry with them when I hear like, I agree with you. I kind of like get to the like I've finished a game and then move on, which often with roguelikes it's kind of harder to do. But my main concern is just like level design, like the fact that I guess it's not even just roguelikes, but just randomly or procedurally generated levels. Like I feel like you have to do that really well for it not to end up. I mean, it's never going to be as good as something custom designed, but often you can see like the way it's designed like a grid, or like, I've seen this room again. And, I think a good example is, this is what we were chatting about in the extra credit podcast, was Bloodborne, where the thing I love about Bloodborne is the level design and how it's all handcrafted, and they've placed every enemy and they know exactly like about the pacing and like the eye line, what you're going to see. Then they got a mode in it, which is procedurally generated dungeons. And it's still the same combat. It still looks the same. If you were glanced over my shoulder at me playing a normal level or one of them, you wouldn't know anything's different. But it's awful. Like it's so boring.
Oh, really?
And it's just like big archway with just bricks filled in. You can say, that could have been a door if they had a different seed or whatever. And that's an especially badly done one. And I think that was probably because they were making this whole other giant game and it didn't get much attention. So I feel like with the roguelikes that do it really well, it's not about the levels, it's about like the loot or like the abilities and the combination of them. And then the environments are, can be artistically, beautiful or whatever, but the actual level design is often really just kind of in the background, it feels to me. I can't really think of one where it's like navigating the environment is like a core enjoyable like primary thing.
Would you count Left 4 Dead?
No, because the environments...
You wouldn't?
No, the environments don't really change.
No, but like the enemy placement and items change. And obviously who you're playing with changes. I guess that's another element.
But like but imagine if it's like, you could come out the hotel and then there's a different thing there. You think about how they've designed that environment and the way the lighting will guide you and all of that stuff. If that was randomly generated, like that would be, mostly lost. So I feel like the difficult stuff they've baked in, and then they can just tweak, 5 enemies spawn here or 2. Ammo spawns here or it doesn't. That's much easier to make good game design. I mean, I guess there's like Rogue Legacy, I guess. But then once again, they'll design a good room, and then it's just, is that room going to be here or is it going to be somewhere else? And I'm not trivializing it. Like there's a great skill to that, but I'm inherently less interested in that than I would be something like Shovel Knight or Hollow Knight. Any game with knight in.
Yeah, the thing with... I did play a bit of Rogue Legacy, and I remember finding it really hard, talking to someone about it at the time, and they were like, oh yeah, you're meant to die to give your like a benefit to the next life. Yeah. That's also quite annoying. Like knowing that and like, oh, okay, I guess I just have to keep dying over and over again until I'm strong enough to get through this.
Yeah. I think it's a certain type of a certain type of mindset that you need for that to not bother you. And it sounds like we'll dip our toe in, and if the game's really good, we'll play it, but we're not seeking that sort of repetition run-based gameplay.
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I like, for example, Into the Breach, I absolutely love that game. It's pretty short. You can kind of finish a run in probably less than 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And then it's done. Do you know what I mean? Okay, I have achieved something. It's not like, oh, you have to do another run to get the right area. It kind of just finishes, and it's like, oh, if you want to go again, you can buy some new robots and go again, or you can just not.
I also feel with Into the Breach, if that game was released as just like, oh, this is just a turn-based puzzly game, we've made 150 levels, can you make your way through them, and they're all, just hand-designed, like, I'd probably enjoy that game just as much. Like, I feel like the roguelike element is actually probably one of my least favourite things with it. I think I'd like it literally just as much if it was just that design. It's just that puzzle design works so well that I don't really care about that. I'm not as you say, I'm not thinking about it in terms of runs and all of, getting better or leveling up my mech. I just want to solve their puzzles.
Yeah. It's weird. That's another one of those games that's I just didn't think of it as being a roguelike until it was pointed out to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe I did see there was one called Dungeons of Dreadmore, which is basically just Rogue, but looks nicer. But it does still look quite rough. I don't know if I don't know. I'm really undecided on this game, especially when it comes to the list as well. It was fun, but was it that good? Or was it fun because it was like, oh my god, I've never seen or played anything that is this old?
I had fun. I had moments of enjoyability. I think my main thing that hurt me was obviously the interface I kind of spoke about, but and it's easy to say that's of its time. I mean, there's a way they could have made it not that. With what they had available to them, they could have just had an equipped button and you choose what you want to equip rather than equipped ring, equipped armor, equipped weapon. There is ways they could have simplified it. But I think my main problem is I never really felt hugely in control about whether I had a good run or not. It felt so much down to the RNG. And I was just like, oh, well, if either I got the weapon or I didn't, either I got overwhelmed by enemies or I didn't. And I'm sure there's little min-maxing I could do to be more efficient and to try and put the edge slightly in my favor. But it felt like the bulk of how well I did was down to did I get the good stuff? I got a ring of regeneration, which made my health regenerate stupidly fast, and I had a great run. I didn't play better that run, but I did really well.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you can't really. In terms of playing better run to run, I guess it's more about the decisions you're making than actually you're not skilling up. You're not doing combat or it's just kind of, am I making the right decision at this time? But also you just mentioned on the random number generator, I found out that it's basically connected to the time, the real life time. That's how it works.
Oh, that's smart. So it's probably not using much more computing program power, is it?
Yeah, so I think it has all these different formulas, and it runs the time through the formula and spits out a number and uses that to feed back to you.
Okay.
Which is quite cool. Maybe that's why they show the time on the screen. Which is also quite a weird thing in that game. And also something else you just said where you're like, oh, E to equip, whatever. The thing that I found interesting reading the instruction book was you press I to take inventory of your armory. You're taking inventory,
you're looking through
it.
Yeah.
Inventory. Yeah. You're not opening an inventory, you're taking inventory, which actually makes a lot more sense. And every game after that has been press this to open your inventory. It's it's not really what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're taking a list of what you're looking at. It's just really weird. I'd never thought of it like that, which is because obviously I've just moved. I had to do an inventory of this flat. So I don't know. I just thought it was weird.
Yeah, the kind of words that the meaning has slightly changed just from, we talk about inventory as if it is a thing, rather than taking inventory of it. I guess it is your inventory as well. Anyway, we're going down an inventory hole. I got some Steam reviews. Did you look for any of the Steam reviews? I was just so curious to what modern reviewers are saying, user reviews are saying on Steam. So I've just saved a few here. So one is you will never get a bigger rush than when you first lay your eyes on the Amulet of Yendor. Sex? Nope. Caffeine? Hardly. Deadly shootout? Meh. Shot of adrenaline? Can't compare. Just be prepared to never look at the letter M or G in the same way again. So that was a good one. And then someone just made me laugh. Someone said, they should make more games like this. And then there's just another one that made me laugh a bit. I won't read the whole one out because it was huge, but it was basically them really angry because the Steam version wasn't the original Rogue, and saying that this is this version, blah, blah, blah. And they did a whole list of like what's different about it. And it's really like minor things, basically about the way this one sounds like it improved the original. But they're just so angry and just saying like, don't be fooled. But like the Steam page couldn't be more clear about what it is that they're selling. And they even say like there was multiple versions. This version is, like they're so clear about it. But this person's so angry because it's not the original Rogue. So that just kind of made me laugh.
Yeah. That's crazy as well. They're selling it on Steam considering it was free.
Yeah, but this was a version. This was a commercial version of it. So like someone's done work on this version. So I guess it's a little bit. Like say there's like properties that go into the public domain. But if I make a thing with that property, I can sell my thing of it. You can still get the original. If I've done a retelling of Alice in Wonderland or something, I could write and release, I guess. But it's the original's still out there.
I wonder if they ever made a version that like had actual graphics, or people wouldn't want that. It kind of seems like it's long overdue at this point, surely. Yeah,
I wonder if we're ready for the relaunch. I wonder if it's just a bit messy in terms of like IP. Like I wonder if just no one owns it. So, a big company wouldn't want to invest money in it if they can't like own the name. I wonder if that's why. It's like too much of a risk. Because if it's a hit, they can't do their sequels.
Yeah, so many things are called Rogue now, aren't they?
Yeah.
Like as you were saying, when you were searching up, it's like Rogue classes in Final Fantasy and stuff. Like, it's just, yeah. But no, it was cool to see a bit of history. I mean, as I said before, the thing that shocked me the most was when I looked at the games that also came out that year, and the fact that it's been out that long and they've never done a version that has actual graphics. It's like, just crazy.
But I know you said you got to use your imagination a lot. Like I kind of did. Like I got to that. I mean, it's so the fact that the character's a little silly smiley face is so funny.
I know.
But I did, when I entered that room and it was just like full of enemies, like I was like, ugh, like I had like a reaction because it's not like, oh, I'm scared there's a big beast. It's I don't want this run to end. So you do get that panic. It shows you can get an emotional response without giving us much.
Yeah. Should we do? I've got quite a lot of questions actually.
Yeah.
Should we do some of these? I know. And also, especially surprising because I forgot to put the post out till last night. So,
okay.
You got your water?
Yep.
Nice one. Okay,
is it going to be like a shocking question that I'm going to like do a spit take for?
Throw a glass in there.
I am the rogue. Whoop!
Yeah. Okay. So, Soom on the Discord asked, when you chose an older game, do you think it gets put higher on the list because of the impact it has or had? Or do you think it has less of a chance because of things like graphics and gameplay that can't rival things like The Last of Us? They've gone for the highest end, high end here.
Yeah, let's compare the graphics. Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah. I think it's interesting. It's something we always struggle with, Legacy.
Yeah, so I always take it into consideration, but I always try to mainly judge it on the attributes of the game. So it is always good, like I think the one we always go back to is Doom as our example of one of the games, that has a huge legacy, but it's also just great as a game by itself. So it kind of has the double whammy. This is going to be leaning much more on legacy. And like, because I always feel like, say if there's a game, let's think, like say Ooblets comes out and, we put it, I know it ended up quite high, but let's say we put it low down and I'm like, oh, it's buggy and the graphics aren't good. And someone could comment and saying, oh yeah, but that's because, it was an indie team and, they didn't have that long to make it. And I've always kind of been in the camp of like, kind of not my problem. It sounds harsh, but like I'm looking at the game as it is. That's the reason it's like that. But I'm looking at the front. So, the graphics are poor. The interface, isn't that good. There's a lot of core, modern game design that this is lacking because it's old. But it is how it is, and that is what we're putting on the list. Where, of course, we'll keep it in mind. Its legacy will play a factor, so that it could help it out a little bit. But I tend to lean, we're putting this game as it is on the list against these other games. That's the way I lean. I don't know. What about you?
Yeah, I mostly agree with you. I think in the case of Doom, it helps that it was also a really good game.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like this game, I can recommend it to people because it's free on your browser, but it's like you really have to want to play it. You really have to put the work in. So I don't know if this one, and also like the fact that it wasn't the first roguelike, it's like it kind of coined the term, or people coined the term around this game, but did it really come up with it?
Well, I think it was so popular. I think that's the thing. This was the one that got, like Doom wasn't the first-person shooter, but they called every first-person shooter a Doom clone. The same studio that made Doom made Wolfenstein, like just before it, like Wolfenstein 3D.
Yeah, true.
But
true.
Doom was the one that got popular, so that's the one that gets the term. And I also feel like there's value in that. Like it might have, it didn't invent it, but it was the one that popularized it, which is kind of almost more important.
I'd say so, yeah.
PUBG didn't invent Battle Royale, but it was the one that popularized it, and then Fortnite, obviously, blew things up even further. It kind of doesn't matter that you could kind of, but if you look at this DayZ mod from back there, blah, 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 you can see the origins of it, but it's kind of more important that this is the one that got people to care about it and, got players to actually play it and talk about it.
Yeah, that's a very well-rounded answer. You're so good at this. Okay. Kelp Goblin on YouTube. They said, I've never seen anything about the original Rogue before, but Roguelikes and Roguelites are some of my favourite games. So to anybody that has played it, I guess that's us, would you recommend I try Rogue?
No. Especially if you've listened to the podcast to this point, especially if you watched the video version, like this should have explained any curiosity away from it. Like, if you want to play a game like Rogue, there's lots of them. You don't need to play Rogue. Unless you really are interested in gaming history, don't play it. It's not worth it, I promise you. It's not worth learning the button prompts.
I'd say it's worth it like once. You'll have your fun once, and you like, I'm looking at the button prompts, and I'm like figuring out this game. Like, it's quite cool, but then it's like you die on floor 15, and you're like,
it's a novelty how clunky and awkward it is. Like, that is a novelty in itself, but it's not fun mostly.
You're like decoding it as you're playing it almost. Okay, so A Cup on Twitter says, most games that are doing roguelikes these days are more like roguelites, which most often means they have a softer version of the permadeath, etc. Do you think that's a good thing that the modern counterparts don't fully copy these harsh mechanics, or are we missing out on a genre?
Do you want to do that one?
Yeah, I think the things that do annoy me about modern roguelikes are the things that, as I said about Dead Cells, when you walk into that room and there's all these items you could get, that's where I was like, oh no, I'm done. And, repeatedly having to play it over and over again in order to see the true ending. That's the sort of stuff that sours me on it. I'd rather it was something that I could get good at myself without having to rely on items in order to get through it. I'd like to see more games like that with the permadeath. Then, make sure you get a good roll on the old random number generation and hope you get through.
Yeah, so I'm the opposite. I prefer that progression. I think some games do. I think Dead Cells it can be a little bit intimidating. I think Hades is a better example of that, where you're kind of just like it kind of works out quite well because the bosses are very difficult, but you're gradually getting better at beating the bosses as you kind of get stronger at the same time. So by the time you've kind of you felt like, I know what I'm doing against this boss. I can, I'm also stronger. So at that point, I don't need to spend ages beating it now because I'm a bit stronger. So I can just start thinking about the next one. And then I know I keep going on about it, but it is one of my favorite games, Slay the Spire as well, where you don't get stronger in a sense, but you'll unlock more cards in that deck. So you'll just have more options, but the cards are very often like side grades. So it's like, oh no, you just have more options, and it kind of just stops the game getting stale because you're unlocking new cards. You're like, oh, I'm going to do a same run as this character, but I just have more options available to me. It's kind of just more interesting rather than, oh, I'm stronger now. So it almost makes it harder because it's like another another ingredient in the broth that you need to try and work out how it complements the other flavors. I think that one is another great example.
I think the what I now know is called non-modal gameplay is the sort of games that I like, where as soon as you start, you can do everything, and you learn what you're up against, and you learn the levels rather than unlocking things.
Yeah.
Like, I like starting a game, pressing each button and going, okay, that's everything. I now know everything. I don't need to learn anything else. I've done it. And then now it's me versus the game until I can beat it. So, like, basically any arcade game is like that. They have to be like that because you can't save them. So,
yeah. There was an arcade. Was it called like Gauntlet? An arcade, like a co-op dungeon crawler. Wasn't that like a bit roguelike-y?
I think it. You didn't have any kind of carryover.
But it was an arcade game.
Yeah. It had this really annoying thing in it as well where you boosted your health by paying money. It was like microtransactions almost.
Yeah, so that came out in 1985.
That's what I'm saying. Like, the game doesn't look good considering
the graphics on Gauntlet look so much. But it's I think it wasn't it randomly generated levels?
Potentially, yeah.
Like co-op.
It might have been randomly generated chunks, maybe. I've just sent you another game that came out the same year as Rogue, which is Moon Cresta, which has just had its latest game in that series came out last year. They're still making those. And like, it looks so much better. Like, it doesn't look great, don't get me wrong, but like, it's so far ahead of.
But I mean, I guess the equivalent. Obviously, it's not really the same, but those games you're sending, and I'll put screenshots up on screen. They are the Last of Us of their time, and Rogue was the. I don't know,
like bedroom developed
Stardew Valley or whatever, or the Undertale, of their time. They were the ones that were little fan they weren't made to make money. It, rolled around for years without them making any money. It was just a cool thing. Nerdy people that were really into computers, which were a niche thing at that time, that were playing around with. Like that's why.
Yeah. This is a good question. This is from Brioche on YouTube. What are some existing franchises you'd like to see adapted to a roguelike? I've got a good answer if you want to have a think.
Yeah, no, you go first.
I think it's an obvious choice for me, but I'd like to see like a classic Resident Evil, like Resident Evil 1, but with like a randomly generated mansion, randomly generated keys, rooms, like enemies. Like, obviously the enemies can't be fully random, but like, the placements all being random. That'd be awesome. Or like, any of those old games that like you kind of know, like Ocarina of Time. They just move everything around every time you play it. It'd be so cool. Yeah. But yeah, I think Resident Evil is a very obvious choice for something like that, especially the old ones.
It's obvious for you.
Obvious for me. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, my first thought of Resident Evil is just like, what I like about it is like the level design. And I'm like, if they're randomly generating it, is it going to be as good? Are you going to end up corridors leading to nowhere, or like the way like you're gradually getting more keys and unlocking more of the hotel? I feel like that's always going to be better when it's custom designed by a level designer rather than software, which is obviously guided by a designer. But that is my first worry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a massive topical thing that we somehow have not touched on, which is AI. AI is getting better and better every single day.
Yeah,
it won't be long until it's able to fully randomly generate something.
I think my pick, so I was struggling a bit. So my first thought was like, immersive sims, because they're saying one of the big things, with roguelikes is kind of that sort of gameplay. But then I suddenly thought of Prey, one of my favorite ones.
Yes,
and then Moon Crash. It has one.
Yes.
And the whole time I was playing it, I was thinking, I wish it was just a normal Prey level. I don't like it as much as the main game. Like, it's good. I like it. It is still Prey, but I just kept thinking, I wish it was just normal Prey. And I know this is probably another really obvious one for me. I think Halo has such a strong combat sandbox where, the combat, because it has a bunch of like, the physics objects and stuff and the way it works with all the grenades and vehicles and stuff. I feel like randomly generating kind of levels, the combat can kind of be so fun by itself. I feel like there's that is something that can actually work okay. I'd prefer that over an open world Halo game, for example. Don't know where that idea came from.
Metal Gear Solid 5 had that like base infiltration, didn't it? But the bases were made by other players.
Yeah.
That's kind of a same weird sort of branch. There's something there that they're quite similar because like that's infinite almost.
Yeah, well, it's using
random.
existing kind of tiles and enemies that can be placed, but it's it's a human placing them rather than an AI placing them.
Yeah,
I think like you're saying, like there's going to be a game that's going to make the most of modern AI technology, which is I feel like we're not kind of ready for how much AI is going to change all our lives in the next 5 years. It's going to be huge, and I feel
we'll
game
be gone,
design.
Mate. There won't be any podcast anymore. It'll just be robot voices.
Yeah, way better than us. Oh no, it's our flaws that make us endearing. Guys, stick around. Yeah. But yeah, I think that will be the one that's gonna really change things. It might not even be a roguelike. It could just make a great game, because they can kind of keep re-rolling until it's perfect. But yeah, that will really transform it, where it's not taking existing assets and arranging them, but it's creating new like enemies, like, and not just. And I'm not talking about like No Man's Sky style. I'm talking.
I was about to say,
Sky. Yeah, creating them properly and like original ideas rather than changing scales of things. That is when the genre could be something really interesting, where you can imagine people posting on Twitter, look at this mad place I found. It's like a this cave, but it's up in the sky, and then there's these creatures that crawl on the ceiling, and I've never seen anything like it in this game. Like that's when it will be a social moment when that game's made.
Yeah, wonder if it will roll into metaverse. And that'll become all these things. All these things have got to come together, haven't they?
Yeah, everything will.
Okay, let's have a look at these questions. Okay, 69 Shades of Peanut on the Discord said, "How long did it take you two to get adjusted to the ASCII graphics? Since most people are so used to modern day graphics. And would you now be interested in trying more ASCII-styled games that put 100% of their efforts into gameplay and extremely in-depth mechanics and systems?" So basically, I guess, how much do the graphics mean in the long run? I mean, it's been a sticking point for this whole episode, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so we didn't play that version. Just to make we did play with very basic graphics.
It's only ever so slightly better.
But even having color, I think, 'cause I did watch like quite a bit of gameplay from that original, and I think it is just nicer to look at. Like going through those hashtags looked horrible for that original version.
Yeah.
So just to be clear,
they're called pound signs, by the way.
It's
called a pound.
The hashtag, is it not?
It's called a pound. It's called a hashtag of the Twitter, but it was originally called a pound, yeah.
Oh, I just thought that was like a hashtag symbol. Oh, I'm sorry. Have I just been like really like, maybe this is going to really help this episode in the algorithm because I've said hashtag so much. I think that's the way it works on YouTube. It thinks we've got like some huge branding deal. It's funny because this is probably by far going to be our least viewed episode, just because we're doing a game that people don't know exists. They just think it's part of a description for a genre. Well, what do you think?
Anyway.
Let's just say basic graphics. Like, how much does that affect your enjoyment of the game?
Well, you got to think like a card game or a board game doesn't have any graphics. They're pretty
It has
fun.
artwork, which I think can affect it.
Not like if it's like solitaire or something. It's kind of like blackjack or something. I guess it's that's as basic as it can get, and it's still fun. Like. Maybe I think it was more how obtuse this game was than the actual graphics itself.
Yeah.
That kind of makes it difficult. Because there's games like, I suppose Downwell. I was going to say Downwell's got simpler graphics because they're only one colour, but
that's a
it does
roguelike.
Look a lot better than this. That's a roguelike! They're everywhere! Every time I think I'm away from them, they keep pulling me back.
Wait, is every game a roguelike, actually? For the graphics thing, I think it just completely depends on the game. So, to go back to Into the Breach, if that had graphics of this level of quality, I think I'd enjoy it 99% as much, because it's all about the gameplay. But then, if I went to play like Elden Ring, I think the graphics really do matter because I think it's beautiful. And one of the big things is I want to explore a new area because I want to see what it looks like and I want it to dazzle me and seeing, the bosses twirling through the air. Like if it was the same gameplay, but, PS1 graphics, but mechanically the same, I probably would still enjoy it quite a lot, but it wouldn't.
You might not try it though.
It wouldn't amaze me. I think if I'm so strong on like recommend, if someone who I trust recommends a game, or like if I listen to podcasts and they're raving about it, like I will check out the game no matter the graphics. Like Vampire Survivors, you recommended it to me. I think it looks pretty ugly. I wouldn't have picked it up if I saw a trailer, but it's. It's great despite the fact I don't like the look of it.
Also, I suppose like when it comes to things like Vampire Survivors, which I also think is quite ugly, there's different things for different people, isn't it? Some people probably think it looks amazing. So whereas we're just AAA babies, and
I was very careful with my wording to try and say I don't think it is bad. I didn't like it that much, but I loved the game. It made my top games of the year.
Yeah. Imagine if Elden Ring was in like ASCII art and it had like, instead of the gold leaves falling down, it was like apostrophes across the screen.
But in 3D. It was a fully 3D game, but just
his body's a big zero.
So funny.
Right. Is it list time?
If that's all of the questions you wanted to pick.
We did have lots of questions, but when I read back through them, we've kind of covered quite a lot of them, but we do appreciate you sending them in, so thank you.
Okay, right then, let's put it on the list.
Okay, so I think for me, generally, it's going to be low, pretty low. Like before we started recording again, I was talking about World of Warcraft because I was looking around 27 to 30. I think that's where it might end up for me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it just has to. It just has to. Like, I know it's important historically, but like, we're reviewing the game. We are bearing that in mind. But it's a chore to play. And I think one of the things is the fact that there's a version of that game with just like tweaks in terms of the way the game's controlled, tweaks in terms of like the way some of the balancing is, that would actually put it up way higher. Like the core concept works, but that initial incarnation, like, wasn't it. It needed like Rogue 2 and using all the same technology, same artwork. It could still have no audio or no music, whatever. Like, but it could be a much better game with just some balancing and interface improvements would transform it. Yeah. But that's not that's not what it is. So we got to put it low down. So do you want to go first?
So yeah, I think I'd probably put it maybe at the either one below Ty, the Tasmanian Tiger, which is at number 30, or maybe below Beyond Good and Evil. I think I had more fun with Beyond Good and Evil ultimately than I did with Rogue. To be fair, I didn't play that much of Rogue either because I've been really busy.
Yeah. My first thought is if I played Rogue as much as I played Beyond Good and Evil, I think, say I had to. Say it was like, for the podcast, we have to play for 12 hours or whatever. It probably wasn't that long I played Beyond Good and Evil, but it felt like more than that. But, I think I would be above Beyond because, like, there was never a moment in playing Rogue that was like those stealth sections in Beyond Good and Evil where I'm like, I actually hate that I have to play this. Like, I do not want to be doing this. Like, I'd be going back in and I'd be like, I do not want to do this again. And there was never a moment like that in Rogue. It never got that, like, negative.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Okay, I think maybe maybe one below Ty. Oh. Maybe it could even go above Ty then, based on that.
No, because Ty
was also quite annoying.
Yeah, it was, but Ty was mainly more, like, bland than bad. Like, it was functionally fine. Like, everything, like, Ty worked. It was
so boring.
It just felt, it was just a bit uninspired.
Yeah.
And Rogue is pretty inspired, I guess.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I don't think I can put it above Ty. I think
you could tell Tom though. Imagine how funny that would be.
Wait, which way
game
around?
That doesn't even have graphics, and it beat Ty.
It's barely even a game, and it.
Yeah.
No, I think it should go under tie. I think that there's a version of it that would like completely outdo tie. But like the way, like, I think, just remember back to my description of how you try and fire your bow. The fact that I'd be like, the thing I should do here is shoot my bow, but I can't be bothered to go through the steps. I'm just going to run up it and whack it with my mace. I don't even want to engage with the mechanics because they make it so like full of friction to use what they've put in the game to where I'm not even bothering it. And then half the stuff I pick up, pretty over half the potions and scrolls and rings I picked up, I didn't use because I didn't know what they were. And so I just didn't use them. And that's like, just because there wasn't enough. Maybe they should have potions of healing you pick up and potions of stamina or strength or whatever. And then sometimes you get a random potion that you need to identify. Like, just that little tweak would have made it so much more engaging because you'd be using all of the mechanics because you'd know what they are, rather than putting on a ring and it's a cursed ring and you have half health. Great. Well, I didn't know. It's either that or just carry it with it in my pocket the whole game and then die.
Yeah, I think friction is the word to describe this game, isn't it? It is almost fighting against you to even play it. It's like it doesn't want to be played.
Yeah.
It's like even the simplest things. I know that there's a button input to automatically walk till you hit a wall. I've played this game for multiple hours. I cannot tell you what it is.
Yeah.
Like, that is like how weird the controls are. It makes Killer 7 look very playable, though.
So let's move Killer 7 up. I don't know what I was on about there. That game is smooth and precise.
It has graphics.
It is the most graphics out of any game on the list. That game is full of graphics. Unfortunately, it's not high up. But I don't regret picking it. I don't think I ever mentioned that it was my choice. I picked it because of the roguelike genre, and I think it's kind of cool to see where maybe it wasn't the original one, but where the name at least came from. And I pretty played it for about 3.5, 4 hours maybe, and I don't.
I think I did the same.
I don't regret my time playing it.
Yeah, I did play it sitting next to Bryony, and she was like, "That looks like the most boring thing I've ever seen." She was like, "What are you even doing?" Like, she couldn't comprehend it was even a game.
Yeah,
I was like, "I'm playing the game." Like,
look, read the text in the top left-hand corner. That's telling you more than what's on screen. We didn't really get into that. It would be like, you got hit by a zombie, like you got slightly hurt, and like you'll eat food and go like, "That was yummy."
Yeah, or that tastes bad, and it's like, is that actually bad?
It's like yuck, but you're like, so my hunger's gone anyway, and I just ate the same like rations.
Yeah. Right. Shall we run down what's coming up?
Let's just. Do you want to just read out from 28 down first? Just
sure. Sorry.
Let people know what the final arrangement is.
Okay, so 28th we have Enslaved. 29 is Harry Potter. 30 is Ty the Tasmanian Tiger. 31 is Rogue. Then we have a gap. And then underneath that is Beyond Good and Evil. God, Beyond Good and Evil just repeatedly gets done, doesn't it?
Oh, poor Jade. And I do like it when it's like for both the bottom and top of the list where like someone's held the title for a long time. Like the way like Ty held the title for ages, the title. And then like it made a big moment when Beyond like took it over. Yeah. Like when something beats Disco, if something ever does, like that's going to be like a shocker. That's going to be one for the ages. It's held there for what, almost a year now? Probably over a year, maybe?
I think it was our 3rd episode.
Yeah, so it's probably been there for about a year.
Yeah. I think probably everything else in the top 10's changed, except for maybe Ooblets.
Yeah. I just feel like it survived like both Last of Us games. Like what's going to topple it?
Yeah. Play it. Play that game now. Yeah. If you are not a faint of heart, play that game. Okay, so upcoming. So next episode, we have Sonic 3 and Knuckles on February the 24th. And then after that, we actually have BioShock 2 on March 10th. Do you want to...
Yeah, so originally, you may remember, we were going to be doing Atomic Heart, which is it's not out as we're recording this, but a game that's probably just about come out as you're listening to this. It's a recent game. We ended up deciding to not do it just because there's a little bit of like, I guess maybe controversy around the game. Basically because the core development studio were based in Russia. There are people, also internationally that develop the game. They've since all moved to Cyprus, but they have put out kind of like statements, obviously, about everything that's going on in Ukraine, but they didn't really kind of put like a strong stance down kind of either way. And we were going to carry on and do the podcast anyway, because, to be honest, I kind of felt bad for the developers because they have been put in an awkward situation with everything that's going on. But we were kind of talking through it today and talking about the pros and cons. And ultimately, we just decided that because of everything that's going on and the fact that the game is themed around Russia and the military, just doing that game now just kind of didn't seem right. And we thought, you know what? I think it's worth kind of switching it out. There's a chance in the future we may return to it, but we kind of just don't know how everything's going to play out with the release. And we don't want to commit to doing that, because then if, we end up realizing that was the wrong choice, it's kind of too late at that point because we don't have any backup. So I also, as a joke, suggested doing BioShock, because one of the big things about the game is that it seems to be heavily inspired by BioShock. So we're doing BioShock 2. I guess we'll get into why I chose 2 out of all of them, because it's kind of a weird choice. In the actual episode, we'll speak more about that. We won't be doing Atomic Heart now. We're going to be doing BioShock 2 instead. If you do have kind of any more questions, whatever, we can kind of read the comments. It was we were discussing it back and forth, and we were right on the edge about whether we should or not. And ultimately, we thought it's best to play it safe. We're a podcast about video games, not about politics. So, I feel like the politics would encroach too much on the game. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Ollie?
Just that we fully support Ukraine. That's
absolutely, of course.
We're not doing the half step. We are fully, and if that's, a small thing that we can do, then that's fine by me. We can fully
not all heroes wear cape, Ollie, and we're fighting the good fight here with our gaming podcast.
Yeah. Exactly. So that's March 10th anyway.
That's after Sonic 3.
Yes. And then we have Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 1, March 24th. Then on April 7th, we have The Dig with a guest. April 21st, we've got Hollow Knight. And we haven't revealed the one after that. Do you want me to? You can always cut me out if I...
Yeah, I mean, I can change it in editing if you want. I'll be honest, I can't remember what it is, so it's going to be
It's Subterra.
Oh, of course, yeah, the board game.
Yeah,
the first ever board game we're doing. So we have mentioned before we will be doing things other than video games. There's some other things other than video games and board games we'll be doing, so if you can try and work out what that will be.
I don't even know what they are.
Oh, we've spoken about. We've already captured some footage of gameplay of it together in London.
Oh yes, we have indeed. Yes, okay.
But yeah, Subterra is a co-op board game. I won't go into it too much now. Obviously, it's going to be a harder one for you guys to play along, but it's a game that we regularly play when Ollie comes down, a little bit of a procedurally generated dungeon crawler in its own right. We thought it'd be kind of interesting to talk about something other than a video game on here.
Yeah, sweet. Cool. That's the last one we've got written down. So in terms of what's coming up on the podcast, that's everything. But the other thing we've got coming up is a Let's Play, which was Joe's. It's your idea. So do you want to give the full
yeah, sure. So first off, hopefully it's coming up. So it's a goal for Patreon. If we reach 135 patrons, then we will do this Let's Play. So it's going to be called Blood Brothers. It's going to be a playthrough of Bloodborne with Ollie playing and me kind of as not his guide, because I want him to experience it himself and get lost, but hopefully taking out the frustration if he gets lost or if he's going to miss something interesting, I can kind of guide him, but also mainly just chatting and ribbing and joking around and stuff and making him think there's going to be things around the corner when there won't. I'll be doing that a lot, so that'll be fun.
You can't tell me that. I know I'm going to be playing it. You spoiled it.
Every single one. So that'll be coming up, and we're hopefully going to try and make it a bit more of a production. It's not just going to be gameplay on screen, us talking. We're kind of planning like what the graphics are going to be like, and talking about kind of the style of it. Because it is as a Patreon goal, we want to make sure we're putting a whole load of effort into it. So if we do reach that goal, then yeah, that will be basically coming out. Like as we're getting close to the goal, we'll probably start recording it. So we're hopefully release it kind of bang on when we reach it. But it's also a good time just to say thank you to everyone that's joined Patreon so far. If you're watching the video version, you'd have seen names of people that joined at the Oni tier coming up on the screen. And also, I think it's just a good time to point out, seeing as we just did an hour's discussion about Rogue, like this is what is so good about Patreon. It allows us to not chase trends and
that's
we
true.
Can do, we can do whatever we can do whatever we want, because it's if you guys are interested in it, and hopefully you are, it means we don't need to kind of go out of our way and try and look at what is the most current game, what are Google searches this week, and then also just upgrade our setup. Ollie's got he's getting soundproofing, he's got a new cover for his mic and stuff. We're able to gradually kind of upgrade our tech and setup as well, and that's all through Patreon. It's been great. It's been really surprising how much support we've had, and the community has been really lovely, so thank you.
Yeah, it's been cool with Rogue as well, because everyone's been playing along, so we have a discussion about people playing at the same time, and people were making shorts of their runs, like where they went horribly wrong. There's Helen's son Seb is in there posting shorts of like he got stuck between two rooms and was just like running back and forth into it, like he just starved, but like he just had the last bit of that because obviously it's a short, so it's just like him running in a circle. He just dies. I was like, that's great. I've been there.
I've actually quickly mentioned my final run, because I named my character like the last run before the pod, because I was committing to it being my final run. But I got to a floor where I couldn't find the staircase. Like I explored everywhere, but there wasn't a staircase, so I knew there was a secret wall. So I was walking around the whole area pressing S, and I just couldn't find it for ages. I was just starving to death, and I was like, God, this is the worst final impression this game could give. Eventually I found it, but enemies randomly spawn in the more you walk around.
Yeah.
So I found the door, and it was just like full of 1 million enemies, just because I'd been walking for so long, and they just destroyed me. And I was like, okay, that's going to be mine. But to be fair, my first thought was like, oh, I should do one more. So I guess that shows that even with that, I thought to do one more. I was like, no, I'm going to live up to the character's name of Final One Before Pod or whatever they were called, and I ended it there.
You still don't want to put it above Ty?
No.
Oh, no. You had me on the edge of my seat then. I was
it's such a cooler game. I know you want it high because it's cooler. It's a cooler entry.
It is cool,
than Ty, and
cool.
You care more about cool. But no, Ty's too competent of a video game for it for them to be switched, I think. But we can revisit in the future. Maybe time will change our view, but I think the list is the way it should be.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. All right, I think that's everything then. We're all good.
Okay, awesome. So Extra Credit, our bonus podcast, that will be out next Friday, and then we'll be back with a guest doing Sonic and Knuckles very, very soon. So stay tuned for that. Apart from that, thanks for listening or watching, and we will see you later. Bye.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.